And we have a whole stack of news there just this weekend. Just on Friday, Tennessee newspapers reported they were going to have regular Army running checkpoints on the highways with the police, as Brigade Homeland has announced, as the Army Times, as Northcom has announced. Our listeners got upset. The governor was called, and we've got that coming up, and they suspended that. But still, we got photographs of other Marine Corps drills going on. So they're acclimating the public. You have car wrecks, the troops show up. You have drunk driving checkpoints, the Marines are there. Again, acclimating you. Starflight for people in car wrecks, the troops. Mass shooting in Alabama. Regular Army show up. This is part of the acclimation. Now, I could go through this all day. Again, there's so many pieces of evidence. Let's next go to modern times. Then I'll go back into the executive orders and the bills and actual numbers you can check for yourselves. Let's go ahead and go to Congressman a year and a half ago on the Homeland Security Board wanting to know about PDD 51. Now, this fight went on for a year. The cover sheet of Presidential Decision Directive 51 stated the president's a dictator. Congress has no power during any emergency, including economic. So now Congress isn't involved in continuity of government when Congress is co-equal to the president and the courts. In fact, the Founding Fathers said Congress was above the courts and the president, but then later courts said, no, they're equal. Now they're saying they're not. Okay? Because it's harder for a dictator to take control in the Congress because there's 500 people. Separation of powers. The president is where your main dictator will come from, so it's the weakest. It follows the orders of Congress and then executes those orders. But then the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee said, I am co-equal with the president in national security. Let me see PDD 51. And they were told no. But the cover sheet alone states the president's a dictator. Then we see last year PDD 51 being executed, and members of Congress, Senator Inhofe and others, being told martial law will be declared if you don't hand total control and immunity over to the banks. And they followed orders and did it. So the martial law is now in place. And with that comes the FEMA camps. Will we get to that place? Not if we expose it. But we're already got our neck in the noose here. Is the executioner going to pull the lever? I don't know. But it's not going to help having GlennBeck denying all this is happening. Let's continue with the congressman talking about PDD 51.
Most Americans would agree that it would be prudent to have a plan to provide for the continuity of government and the rule of law in case of a devastating terrorist attack or natural disaster. A plan to provide for the cooperation, the coordination, and continued functioning of all three branches of the government. The Bush administration tells us they have such a plan. They introduced a little sketchy public version that's clearly inadequate and doesn't really tell us what they have in mind. But they said, don't worry, there's a detailed classified version. But now they've denied the entire Homeland Security Committee of the United States House of Representatives access to their so-called detailed plan to provide for continuity of government. They say, trust us. Trust us, the people who brought us Katrina, to be competent in face of a disaster. Trust us, the people who brought us warrantless wiretapping and other excesses eroding our civil liberties. Trust us. Maybe the plan just really doesn't exist, and that's why they won't show it to us. I don't know. Or maybe there's something there that's outrageous. The American people need their elected representatives to review this plan for the continuity of government.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose is the gentleman from Texas rise?
All right, that's Congressman Peter DeFazio. Now, that was a year and a half ago. Mr. DeFazio, the cover sheet says the president's a dictator and that Congress has no authority over continuity of government. That's why they're now saying Congress can't see it, because they're declaring and executing that power. That's why the vice president's heard saying he was above Congress and above the executive and in his own area of government, declaring new imaginary powers. That's why the White House chief of staff and the top lawyers and chief counsel were writing the president was God and could order the torture of children in front of their parents. And this is the Führer precept, or saying the leader is the law. Now, we fast forward a year plus to October 3rd, And here is Congressman Sherman, who we interviewed here on air, other congressmen we interviewed, and Senator Inhofe, saying they marched in and told them martial law will be declared if you don't do this. So we go from the 80s to where don't talk about the martial law plans and the FEMA camps. If you want to know about that, you can know about it in executive session, Congressman Jack Brooks, to, oh, Congress, you're not allowed to see the plans now. To, Congress, do what we say, we're under martial law. Now, you want proof of martial law, proof of FEMA camps? Here it is. Go ahead and play it.
The only way they can pass this bill is by creating and sustaining a panic atmosphere. That atmosphere is not justified. Many of us were told in private conversations that if we voted against this bill on Monday, that the sky would fall, the market would drop 2,000 or 3,000 points the first day, another couple thousand the second day, and a few members were even told that there would be martial law in America if we voted no. That's what I call fear-mongering. Unjustified. Proven wrong. We've got a week, we've got 2 weeks to write a good bill. The only way to pass a bad bill, keep the panic pressure on. Now, what has the Senate done to this bill?
All right. And exactly. And now they've passed more bailouts, more stimulus packages, total federalization of health records, federalization of the internet. It's all happening. Mother Jones admits Obama is, quote, taking over the internet and preparing to shut it down. That's what the bill says. Even liberals are admitting this is happening. See, it was all about Bush was going to do this. No, Bush was a puppet. Just like Nixon and Carter and Reagan and Bush and Clinton and Bush and Obama, they're just puppets, and we always obsess over them, and the media acts like they're running something. It's the executive power held by the National Security Council. In fact, 3 weeks ago, they had an article about General James Jones and the National Security Council saying they've now taken over continuity of government, even from the executive and Homeland Security, and that this private group runs it all. And then General Jones was in the CFR website writing, I take all my orders from former national security heads, Henry Kissinger and the CFR. That's why in the last week there have been 4 mainstream news articles that we posted at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com with Bilderberg group members like Etienne Davignon, the chairman of Bilderberg, saying, we set up the European Union, we set up the G20, we've set up the New World Order banking system. Now they're openly bragging it's world government and they run it. And then if I dare talk about it and go, look, Etienne Davignon told the EU Observer, he told the newspaper this, they go, oh, shut up, Jones. You crazy nut, none of that exists. And if you talk about it, you're going to cause violence. Just give in to the New World Order, roll over to it, hand your guns in. And I get back to this thing about GlennBeck. It's ridiculous to say that we're not going into tyranny when PDD 51 says the president is a dictator. Go read it for yourself. When the John Warner Defense Authorization Act says the governors serve at the pleasure of the president. The Pentagon issued a directive 6 months ago saying their job is now crowd control and that the governors serve at the pleasure of the president. They're dual-headed officers, and they've issued 1404.10. In fact, I forgot to print that for this presentation. There's just so much racing through my mind I want to document. Google that story that we wrote about... Aaron knows about it. Get him to print it. The one about Pentagon creates new civilian force. I think it's 1404.10, but I want to be exact on that with folks. And so we've got all of this here. Now I've already covered... Let's go ahead and get to this. You want to see what goes with FEMA camps like a horse and carriage. Troops, militarized police, training with the Army to take over your cities and towns. Now, the Pentagon has now announced all of this, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But first, let's go ahead and play this YouTube clip, Martial Law is Coming, from News 7 at 11. Okay, let's go ahead and play this clip for folks. We have hundreds of these around the country as the police and military train to take over your towns and cities. Here it is.
The scenario was a fake, but the pepper spray and billy clubs used to break up this riot were definitely real. Good evening, I'm Miranda Stevens. Whether it's terrorism, riots, or any major disaster, local agencies will be the first to respond. That's why Roanoke City wants its disaster training to be as real as possible. Jeremy Butterfield has more.
It's supposed to look like a riot, and the scene at William Fleming High School had all the elements.
I'm one of the rioters that the guard and the police force had to take down and arrest, and did very successfully.
In this scenario, everyone has a role to play. The rioters were ready to fight back as Roanoke Police, Roanoke Fire, local National Guard troops, and members of the Virginia Defense Force secured perimeters and moved in to make the arrests.
Prior to 9/11, these organizations couldn't communicate and did not work together.